Episode number 3, and my next guest is Sebastião Teixeira. It was a really great conversation today, and Sebastião has a great a great track record in terms of building startups. He focuses on design concepts, but he's also founded his own e-commerce platform called Maison Pixel. More information about that in the bio. But it was a good conversation especially for creatives, trying to understand, as a creative, where does creativity end and the business running start, and how do those two interplay with each other. So it was learning for me. I'm not a creative, stepping into an uncomfortable area in terms of understanding or trying to develop my understanding in a new topic completely, and understanding what goes through the mind of someone who is incredibly creative and how they balance their business needs versus their creativity. You can learn a lot from him in terms of knowing where your boundaries are and where your strengths are, and when to seek help to bring more help in to find success in whatever your endeavors are. So if you're a creative or you're thinking about working with creatives, this is the podcast to listen to. So yeah, it's so good to have you, and just
Thank
wanted to, we've got a lot of concepts that we've just been talking about that are like really quite exciting, and taking a couple steps back, like, why am I doing this? For me, there's two main reasons. Is number one, I was part of a large global startup. They exited, I left the company after their IPO, like really good experience for me. I bought into another startup that we started to build, and I'm not really operationally involved and feeling quite rudderless in life. Decided, okay, well, what should I do? And started working with a life coach about building out some new projects and how to make decisions about what I wanted to do. So podcast came up, and then the reason a podcast is because it was a really good way for me to give back some sort of blueprint around how I've sort of accidentally found success in my life, and thinking about ways that people could replicate some of these things in their own life to build success for themselves. And your story for me has been like really great. So we had brunch together. You showed me this great concept in terms of where you had like stop animation to build like an advert using socks. It was like this crazy advert. I was like, wow, like really creative. Then you've got Maison Pixel, which is like a really cool like fashion design, it's underwear, swimwear. Like it's like a really cool concept. I'm like, here's someone incredibly creative building business. And how does that journey look like when you're incredibly creative and trying to be successful in business? Because I found sometimes those two don't mix well. Is that something that you found, that creativity doesn't always go well with business, or can they work well together, or creatives don't work well in business?
As we discussed prior on camera, I think it's due to make a small disclaimer that obviously this is all based on my personal experience. So I'm not trying to preach anything here. Even though I connect with the creative community and I know a lot of founders and startups, again, this is just my perspective on things. And going back to your question, I think that it is a difficult task to accomplish. Being creative and succeeding, so to say, whatever that means in business. Or if we want to do, we want to narrow it down, I think it's very hard to execute a business plan when you're very creative, because you're always constantly challenging yourself. And so that detours from a plan, so to say. But I do want to make the distinction as well, what is being creative, because I honestly feel baffled sometimes when I look at managers or just CEOs of startups or even of other founders that stick to a plan, an execution plan. And to me, that's creativity as well. The way that you navigate the challenges of startups, that's a creativity challenge in itself.
Yes.
My outputs typically goes into marketing and branding and design, product design and whatnot. And so with that in mind, that when you clash it against a business plan, that tends to be a little bit hard. And when you don't have, like I did, unfortunately, I didn't have a business partner, so to say, so I could not output some of my thoughts to them or outsource them to them. So we didn't have a conversation. That all happened within my head. And it was very hard at times. It was very hard. And what happened eventually was that the business side of it won.
Okay.
even against my will. And I thought that I was making the right choice, because okay, let's stick to the business side of it. Let's stick to an execution plan. Let's build this. Let's go with performance, growth, whatever the narrative of the last 10 years has been in startups. And eventually, as I tried to follow up the plan, and perhaps I'm not very good at it for start, but what happens is the creative side was left behind, and eventually that took a toll on business as well.
Okay.
So the conclusion that I'm kind of wrapping up as experience builds up is that perhaps I should have kept on the other side and tried to get someone, and that's the point where I'm at now. So yeah, I think it does. It's very hard to manage pull both things at the same time, because at times they're very much opposed to each other. I would say, and I think it's a very healthy thing to have within a structure someone like me pulling you back on a different direction and trying to make you think the other way around, and the same with me, having someone that grounds me and says, look, but we have to do this. Okay, you can navigate and create whatever you want, but let's do this, and at least think about the next step.
Yeah, so it's kind of like sort of your I want to ask more about that too, is in terms of finding the right partner. But as a creative, I get a sense that a creative person, you still have to define the medium in terms of how you're going to present your creativity, and that in a sense becomes some sort of template. And so the right partner can do that for you, saying like, okay, I get where you're trying to go from your sort of your visionary piece, and like the artist in you wants to go this way, but kind of you need to paint it on this, or you need to create it on this for it to go to meet the real world needs of what you're trying to do, so it doesn't become too disconnected from the people that we're trying to reach, or the people that we're trying to engage with.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Yes, I think that's it. It's like a framework, and sometimes it's just as easy as a schedule.
Yeah, yeah.
So this, imagine, if you will, we want to do a new product launch. Okay, we have to plan it, we agree on it, and how products go. Everything that you plan eventually goes a little bit sour, or delays, especially when you're trying to pull off something rather new or exciting. There's a lot to unpave. So just having like a project manager or someone that grounds you, says let's keep with the schedule, let's keep with the budget, so to say, next level.
Yeah,
that helps you a lot. And when I say it helps, I really do think it fosters creativity, because no one is creativity by its own. If I was left to my own devices, just you can do whatever you want. It's not a good place to start. It's a good place to start a framework or a conversation, but you have to ground it somewhere. Even if you go, at least on these areas which are more specific, design and product, which have have budget, have an audience, have a price point, have a business plan. So it's not like fine art, and even art you have to ground it somewhere to have a goal, and it helps a lot to have someone.
Yeah, because you create a setting, right? Like I think if you create a setting for creativity, it will flourish, right? And like you said, the business won out versus your creativity, which is because that was the necessary thing, and now you have the business knowledge, and now it sounds like you want to move back more to creative and bring a partner in who can help you with the business components or the operational components. You now have a very good understanding of both sides of the fence, right? So it's going to help bring empathy for what they're trying to achieve, and you'll have an understanding in terms of how to fit that better.
Definitely. But even so, the experience is we're speaking about founders and startups and whatnot, and because I have been a design consultant for way more longer than I did business, so to say.
Yeah.
And I thought at least that I had a very nice ability to understand. If I sit down with you and you're my client right now, I can easily interpret it. What are your needs? Where should we pull back? Understand whatever concept is on your mind. Eventually go even further, try to unlock it and see what's troubling you that you're not accessing at first, because you're relying, I need this because we need to conquer this or have this goal. And I always try to go deeper. And I thought that I had that ability, and I have when I work for others. But when you go into your own thing and solo, everything gets mingled. So the approach that I came out with, so going back to what you're saying, now I can really understand even deeper. So when I work for others, I really know, and especially for startups, I really know at least the blueprint of their pains. And the way that they don't have answers, where I can place them. And so that's a very nice exercise for me. That's a lot of growth that came out of it. So the experience is really very enriching. And if there's one thing that we can say that's a little bit preaching, but it's like an advice or something that I'm excited about, that I try to extend to all of my creative friends and partners, or wherever I have the ability to talk to, if they have something that they like, other than whatever they do on a daily basis, like a small product, an idea, a small label, doing podcasts, something like that, they should try and go and do that extra mile, because that will put them in a place that no brief can ever do. So it was a crash course
of that, you know. Yes. And I'll tell you, like, it's a completely different example, but you know, I'm really into fitness. You know, it's been a big part of my persona from a very young age. And in my mind, like, owning a gym was the big thing for me. Like, for as long as I can remember, like, having my own space and having my own gym, and you know, and helping others with their sort of their fitness and health goals was like always the thing. And so the opportunity to start a CrossFit gym came up, and I started one. And by the end of year 2, I was like decimated. It was I had a startup running. I was working in another startup as a CEO for that business, and I had the gym sort of running, and it was like a very hands-on small business. So I was waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning, going and taking a class, then shooting over to the startup, running that as the CEO for the day, and then sort of wrapping up at the end of the day and going back to the CrossFit, you know, and sort of taking a late night class. And so by the end of sort of 2 years, I was completely decimated, and I completely fell out of love with a thing that I absolutely was passionate about. And what doing the business taught me is what I loved about it. I loved the physical exertion for me. I didn't like the business components of it for other people. And so it was like this really like interesting journey. And it kind of took me about 2 years later to develop my own motivation for my own training back. And so that's really it was like this really long thing. And so I think that's also, it's like that discovery, that self-discovery is about saying, immerse yourself in your ideas and your passions, and figure out where there are passions and where there are business opportunities, because I think that those are important distinctions to make, because you can damage it for yourself, I think.
And did you feel at any time during that process, because I think that the brain tricks you in a way, did you feel like, I can do this, I could run the gym if I wanted to, I love this, but I could run this, but I have other stuff I do, perhaps I'm not suited for this, and this is very confusing, because to me that was the process. At some point I was trying to do my best, and obviously, again, no bragging, no preaching, there's obviously a lot of people trained and much more versed than I am at running a business, but I was succeeding at doing it. But it's very bizarre, because in a way I was trying to undermine it, because my heart felt on the other side, but again, I would validate myself. I can do this if I try. I can do this if I try. And I was getting perhaps even more tired than the task at hand already was very demanding.
Managing the mental battle around
it. The tasks, the wills of it. And so I found like a safe space, so to say, going back at doing design consulting for others. And it kind of wrapped up the whole thing for me. Like, okay, if I want to do this, and I'm still doing it, obviously, but I shifted the weights of it. I'll have to at least focus, I would say, 90% of my time on the creative. And the other 10-ish, so to say, doing business related things.
And that comes through that great partnership of working with someone who's taking 90% of that and you plugging in the 10% to. But so to answer your question, for me, what actually started to become at odds was the life that I wanted to live, and did this necessarily fit? And for me, that fit wasn't very clear. You know, I had ambitions of building something much bigger, and I wanted to be rewarded by that rather than running a small business. and
Okay.
the time and effort in there. And also, I thought that by owning that business, I would get more time to do that.
Yes,
And I actually ended up getting less time
obviously,
because
and
so
enjoying it
exactly.
less.
So now, like my life didn't completely match. Like my exercise routines had diminished, my nutrition sort of
Yeah.
structure had diminished, and I was spending a lot of time creating that for others. And you kind of look in it like like the kid looking in the window at the candy store, like actually I want to be on that side eating the
Yeah.
candy, not doing it. So that kind of was another thing. And and then pursuing getting back into startups really sort of ignited the things that actually really reward me and the life that I want to live. So that's kind of
Cool.
the journey that I took. And so I also get like a sense like you have a lot of humility in terms of how you approach your experience, like saying like I don't want to preach around things, but like you've kind of walked a path already, and others wanting to walk that path. Like, so what is some sort of early stage advice you'd give to yourself from sort of 30 years ago? I don't even know how long that would be for you, but what would be that earlier you advice you'd love to give yourself?
Um, this will sound very romantic and very cliched on its own, but I don't think I can pull back anything. I think that this is the sum, even though it hurts me in a way.
Yeah.
I still don't know the formula that I would go back and say, don't do this, focus on this. Obviously, there's tiny little things that you learn by experience.
Yes.
But there are the ones that you have to put the time to learn them. There's no way of shortcutting that.
Yes.
Because since forever I've been hopping from place to another. I studied engineer. I was a dropout in engineer. Then I went to design, dropped out from design. Then I went to jazz school and I dropped out from jazz school. And it's the sum of all of those experiences that that really make up for what it's here at this point. Experiences tend to get more intense as you go in life. It's different to be a college kid doing something that at a startup environment.
Yeah.
But if I would reverse this and try to project it for the next 30 years, I would assume the key is the same thing.
Yeah.
Keep on being excited with everything and keep on hopping on everything.
Yeah.
It is clear that from time to time you'll get, by the circumstances of these situations, like for instance in last 10 years I was apparently a business guy.
Yeah.
And I was not clearly suited for that. That doesn't mean that I will never have my own business. That's the way that I think that the idea was reinforced by that experience.
Yeah.
But I had to, so to say, trial and error. So it's always difficult to do this because it goes back to who you are.
Well, you're the sum of your parts, right?
Yeah,
like, and
and
the
if-
sum of your experiences, right? Like,
And I think that's one thing that I took out. There's a lot of stuff that I don't like about the startup environment, but if there's one thing that I do like, and this is a talk apparently about creativity, and I always associate creativity with curiosity.
yeah.
And there's one key thing that I understood, that everyone that dips their feet on startups, on trying to do their own business, they're curious. They want to jump into something. And it was very rare that I was having a conversation with someone that had a company or something, and they were interested about what I was doing, almost to the point that we say, oh, I want to be a part of it and I want to be a part of yours, like kids trying to trade.
Yeah.
So that's the only key advice that I would say to a person that has that profile.
Yeah.
Keep being curious, because you have, but eventually it will not work. I would say,
Yeah.
at times it will not work properly.
Yeah, and I think that curiosity with sort of a degree of execution is really important. It's like, my journey is also like very similar. So I'm not similar to yours but in terms of I left school. I didn't qualify for a university entrance, so I had to immediately figure out like what I'm going to do. And I managed to get a job, and literally the first offer was work for free, just so I could learn to build computers in the back room. And then they started paying me like a pittance of a salary, and from there like developed into sales. And I think the thing is I always just took a step forward, used the curiosity. Well, I'm curious about this. How will this work? And put myself forward. Like, you can often make yourself look a bit of fool, because you're going to ask questions that reveal that you don't know
Obviously.
about what you're talking about. And you sort of, you put yourself out there in a way with your curiosity, and then you just do. Attempt, like the learning that will come from even any failed attempt is so important in terms of
It
your
hurts.
overall development. It does. It hurts. And that's the thing, like, you know, you will do business again.
Yes.
That's going to be the thing, but you're going to do it differently. You're going to take
Yes.
some new learnings into, say, like, last time was a bit too much of this, or a little too, not enough of that. And then you build a new version of yourself. And so your evolution as a person does come from curiosity, execution, just trying. And, you know, like a crazy example, I'm, you know, with sales teams that I'm working, like, hey, you should start a side business. It's like a crazy thing to tell someone, right? Like, who's working for you, but like, you should start a side business, and then start a Facebook page and try and market your own business.
Yeah, definitely.
Because then you'll get insight in terms of what you are asking your customers to do.
Definitely.
Right. Like, and that's like a big development thing, and it's doesn't cost anything. It's like, it's really cheap to try things nowadays.
Yeah. And you've touched point in something that I think it's very important, that you said that when you're guided by that curiosity, sometimes you look like a fool.
Yeah.
And most of the times I look like a fool. There's something very interesting when I have a corporate client, so to say, and I have a sit down with it. I listen to whatever they have in mind that the marketing department or the CEO or something like that has to say about what their needs are. And I listen to it very carefully. And then I head over to very basic questions, almost like childlike questions. From time to time, it's almost embarrassing that I'm doing those kinds of questions. But it's very important, because it unbalances everyone that's in the conversation. So this is a bike. Why do you pick this color? Well, and that flows a conversation, and eventually it will lead to something. And I tap into that inner curiosity of the person that's in front of me, that by means of life is doing execution, and it taps back to something that they lost a bit, and that sparks something. And most of the time when I'm successful, and here I'm going to brag a little bit, usually I am, because I did it a lot of times. When I leave that couple first meetings or intense one-to-one work sessions, the work is almost done creatively. And it was done a little bit by both of us. So when I deliver it packaged, it's really beautiful. People say, oh, this has a lot of logic. Instead of me going back, replying with a PowerPoint presentation, blah, 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 handling and all, oh, this is the trend and this is the whatnot. So I even when I'm not by myself, I try to push that dumbness, so to say, or childlike behavior. Like, let's just, what is this? Why is this? Why is this? Oh, because I'm saying that I need to reach the target of why? Oh, what's the interest? Why? And that lowers the tone a little bit and heads over to different spaces.
And it brings about two things. So that dumb question, so to speak, the dumb question that you present, or the most basic question, does a few things. Number one, it opens vulnerability to say, I don't actually know everything about your business. And why don't you tell me? Like, there's a lot of jargon gets thrown around. And then we buy into the jargon. Silicon Valley says, buy the jargon, right? Like, there's so much jargon. Startup, it's jargonable, right? Like, and so you can sit on the back and they're like, well, I don't actually understand what that means. And so now I'm going to be vulnerable. But the immediate thing that happens in the other person is like, they go into teaching mode. Okay, well, I can teach you about that. And now, because you're vulnerable, I'll become more vulnerable. And then it leads to trust. And once the trust develops, great outcomes happen.
Or outcomes in business, I would assume, if we were to work together and I'm the creative part of the business and you were the business side of it and the execution, if we were being completely open to each other, different solutions would be accommodated. And I would quickly understand what our needs and so forth. So and there's another thing that actually is very interesting, that we're touching point on the jargon and the whole thing. When I tried to emulate, and I was not emulating, but I was trying to get very focused on the business side of my business, even though it's not that I don't believe it, but I knew that it was jargon. I was just holding on to the performance, to the growth, to whatever people were saying about it. You have to grow, you have to do, like, raise capital, do it again, do that. And I was following that plot. I don't know why, because I know why, because I didn't know what I was doing, and that was life, an anchor, so to say. Okay, let me just try and follow up what these people are saying that I should do. And Not that it's wrong, but it didn't work out for me because I had other plans, and
Yeah.
that's very interesting. Another key thing that happens from time to time, and I don't think that the markets or business are not used to it, is perhaps some things at some point don't have the capacity to go forward.
Yeah.
For instance, a couple of times this happened to me. I get called for a brief and a sit down with a client that has some needs, and we do this working sessions.
Yes.
And by the end of it, I said, "Look, I don't think you should go ahead
Uh-huh.
of what you were trying to do at first."
Yeah.
And they're saying, "You don't want to do the gig?" "No, I would love to do the gig.
But not this.
I don't think that this
Yeah,
gig makes sense.
Yeah.
I could do it. You can pay me. I can produce the output, but I don't think it makes sense because of our conversation." And then I go back to those conversations and say, because we discussed this and that, and they perhaps say, "Oh, okay."
Yeah.
And what happens next is very interesting. So what could happen? Oh, let's try and figure out what we could do.
Right.
This plan doesn't work, but typically people don't say no. So to those kinds of gigs, you're my client. I will not say no to you. Let me go back, try and build up a presentation, some nice graphics,
Yeah.
motion graphics.
Yeah.
You're very impressed. I prepackage it. I have my portfolio done. Okay,
Yeah,
write me a
exactly.
check, and now we're gone.
And
So the saying no is really
it's a critical bit. I think, going back to the VC thing, is like, I think that's a so big challenge, because you get fixated on growth metrics in your business or wanting to achieve certain things, and you lose sight of the vision of what you want to build. And so then you take it out to markets. You say, I want to raise some money now because I absolutely need to raise money to make this thing a big thing.
Mhm.
And then you start speaking to VCs, and then they all have an input about how your business should be.
Mhm.
And by the time you raise money and you're working for this new board, it's very far away from the vision of what you had or wanted to start
Okay.
to start building. And so being true to what you really want to build will make sure that you align the right people around you. And so someone will dangle $2 million in front of you. It's not the right $2 million. It's not going to work well for you, because the expectation is something different in terms of what you think you should be building.
And what's your key outcome to this? How do you manage that balance? Because that was what I found, it was very difficult to, because we started up really fast, as everything apparently successful does.
Yeah.
And then people say, you have to scale up, you have to scale up. And even you feel like it, oh, well, you should scale up.
Yeah.
But yeah, you lose track of it. So what's the key here? You have to deter it. Don't pay attention to those.
I think so. The first thing that I think is that you have to step back
Mhm.
from what you're trying to do. So often you get caught up in the process. So you build a business and you start thinking, okay, I've got a little bit of runway, but if I pumped some money into this, I could accelerate things like really aggressively for myself. And you sort of take your product, you take your business to market, and you get your first sort of set of feedback. And then the first thing that you naturally do is you change your pitch offering to the feedback. And so now you've completely bypassed what you were originally doing, instead of thinking about your story.
Okay.
And so we learned this the hard way, and we are not finished with the process, just to be completely honest, but we learned this the hard way, is that actually we hadn't found our business's story yet. And we needed to spend more time identifying what is our actual story, what is our real offering. We were caught up in the legacy of the business that we bought. So we have a name that exists. There's a cool, so this, and we have an understanding from the market in terms of what we should be. And so we were trying to leverage that to raise money. But then it created a mismatch when we were talking about it, because we weren't actually that business anymore. And so then we got a bunch of feedback that this is what we should change. So then we altered that some more. And then by the time we were presenting the last sort of 20 or 30 presentations, it was completely different. So then
that happened to me
exactly. And so then we're like, oh, hold on. What are we doing? And why is this valuable today? And we figured out our business is actually a data business. And so now that we had a data business, we started to understand what data could mean and what the vision of data would be. And our story became very clear.
Okay.
And then when we started telling that story, we got way less feedback.
Okay.
People started, because people could buy the story. So they couldn't give us feedback on a great story. That's a great story. We want to be part of that. It's wrapped up. It makes complete sense what you're trying to say. And so it removed ambiguity for us, and it became, so my key takeaway was spend more time just clarifying who you are as an entity, as a person, as a vision, and build your story around that, and then take that out. The more time you spend there, the less drama you'll have in terms of iteration later.
The thing that I learned, and this is interesting because everything connects, obviously, and this being a conversation about creativity, is that I quickly understood that my story was about creativity.
Yeah.
Designing great products or trying to have fun, exploring stuff within a certain established path of design, and trying to understand what we could produce.
Yeah.
There was some key valuable things that we were poking around that were very interesting from a design point of view and a business point of view, namely 10 years ago trying to tap something that for us was pretty obvious, and now 10 years went by and it is pretty obvious that gaming culture, computers, what everything that would permeate fashion.
Yeah.
And that spending 10 years ago was, I would assume, 70% of our day online, and now it's 99.9, would eventually trickle you into thinking what is real and what's not, and what's the deal with that with fashion.
Yeah.
So we're going to be presented digitally for people to see us. Is this real? Is this a projection?
Yeah.
So that was very interesting for us, and that story was super well defined. But I think at least, and I think that was a key mistake, so to say, was that I was in a way embarrassed of just saying that. Like, you're going to invest on creativity, on design, intellectual property, and eventually a business will come out of it.
Yeah.
So I was piggybacking on some relative success that we were already enjoying and say, look, but this is very important, the whole creative thing, but look at this business plan. We're going to grow. We're going to do this and that. The whole thing with the startup business. And perhaps that was a mistake that I now come to realize that I should have owned.
Yeah.
But to this day, I feel like I don't know, and you can provide some feedback on this as you're way more experienced. I still don't understand if someone could invest just in creativity. Okay, but I'm really aware on what I'm investing at. This is going to produce an output that is creative. The chances are that this execution is going to be slimmer because this is an explored territory. And to this day, I don't know if people invest just in creativity. Even though when we see stuff like Bitcoin and whatnot, those are really creative businesses. The chances are really high.
Yeah.
And so people in some way invest in risk. That's risk. So,
yeah.
But I think that's what.
Yeah. So I think I hear what you're saying, and I think it depends on the investor, because so much everyone's trying to find a success model or algorithm, right? And even in investing, if we invest in 30, they'll 30x, and 90% will fail, but we'll still have this great outcome. And so everyone tries to create some sort of model around the investment or model around the portfolios they invest in. Like that's like what we see, and then you sort of, depending on which market you're on, sort of the maturity of their VC or investment landscape, might not be big innovators. They might be big adopters of what the latest trend is. And in terms of, and I've never tried it for creativity, but my natural assumption is that the right partner will.
Okay.
The right visionaries will say, I have a good understanding of what creativity will develop, and and I'm not interested in immediate monetization or the 5-year out. I'm thinking about what the future change of this will be. And I think your latest sort of ad campaign with streaming panties is almost like a way of showing potential that sort of non-creative or non-visionaries can sort of tangibly get. Now, like, okay, so I can stream something off of my partner's butt. Super cool. It's like a really interactive way in terms of where fashion meets online. It can be too disconnected from someone who's like just analysis, just numbers, etc. So then it comes down to like sort of the partners and the network that you have. Someone who can sort of get it, or maybe has walked a similar path in terms of innovation. So I think that people will, and that's, again, if you went out with the specific story or the honest story, the right partner aligns, and then you stop tap dancing in the room to make other things materialize that you probably then are going to be held hostage to for the rest of time of that money to provide it, rather than the thing that you really wanted to build.
Yes, obviously, and to pay justice to, because we eventually raised seed capital, and everyone that came on board, which I consider as friends or people that I am close by with, they bought the first version of the story.
Yeah.
They got it at first.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting what you're saying, because now we go into something that is, where are you at what specific point? And
Yeah.
if we go back 10 years from where we are right now, and I was in Portugal, right after we spoke with these friends of ours, which is always the way that we go when we're starting a business, who wants to jump in and they get excited about it. It's almost playful. But when I wanted to take it up to the next level and try to speak with VCs or companies or funds that were investing, yeah, the landscape here in Portugal was very much analytically driven.
Yes.
And it, given that it's a very small market, they wanted tech. They want, even though that we resemble tech in a way, and
Yeah.
we're, again, going back to the streaming on this, because it's always our thought process. We're kind of, it's a big reflection on how the digital life is merging with
Yes.
ours, even in an aesthetic way. So it was very hard, because whenever I sit down with someone, they wanted multiple Lexes when I'm going to do this and that. And so immediately I changed my discourse into going to that way.
Yeah,
And perhaps if I were to be exposed into a different kind of environment, perhaps I would meet that people as well.
Yeah.
But eventually I would funnel it to the right person that only deals with this kind of business, so to say. And just to set the record straight, every time I mention creativity or sticking to a plan, it doesn't mean that creativity doesn't follow a plan. That it's not a bin of loonies that are doing drawings on the wall. When I'm saying that, it's different than saying following a strict business plan. That obviously every time that we have something in mind, it follows A to Z path, and we're pretty much versed into delivering a specific output. So I don't want people to get the extreme idea that, oh, this guy's a crazy guy, and I'm going to dump a shitload of money on top of him, and he's going to blow it up with nothing to come out of it. No, it's not. It's not that. It's freer in this form, but it obviously follows a plan.
It does. I think that's all process, creative or otherwise, needs to follow some sort of structured plan, or some consistent execution in relation to it, right? Like, you might be building, like, whatever it is, but you're going to show up daily, you're going to apply yourself to that, and you're going to build something, and then you're also going to have a clear indication of when it's done.
Yes.
Right. And those things. And so, and business is like that. Business has a huge amount of creativity in it. I think that also not to sort of compartmentalize business people. And it's like this, like you said, like following a plan is another type of creativity. But in every single startup, every day, there's a huge amount of creativity. You meet this roadblock. Okay, how do I solve around this? I had this negotiation with this person last week, and now they don't want to do it that way. And so you creatively problem solve. So creativity, like, sort of, it sort of penetrates all aspects of business. And so it's not just about the design and, sort of the pretty stuff that we want to build. It's in everything in terms of how you approach your day to day. And so, I think that's also very important to sort of understand when you're trying to do these things, is that, it's not, like you said, a bunch of loonies in a room and we threw a couple cans of paint in there and we'll sort of see what comes out at the end of the day.
There's a lot of structure to it. There's a lot of, it's a rather boring process at times, because it has some schematics as well. What I think that we both are discussing, it's the frequency is different.
Yes.
So perhaps the frequency, or that CEO taps creativity, it's a different kind of frequency that a creative director does. And again, the execution on this one is a little bit different on this one, but they mingle. And so,
I mean, you spoke about sort of a changing journey. Like, can you just touch on sort of like what your sort of your roadmap has looked like in terms of that's created the essence of you and your learning? Like, how do you come to be where you are today with streaming panties? Like, what was the roadmap to here?
From way back, or just product related?
From way back. Like, how did you get to today?
So while I was studying engineering, which apparently had very analytical thought process, which was very much on calculus and as very scientific thought, I was because I was always enamored with computers and math.
Okay.
And so I was always on my computer exploring software and doing a lot
Okay.
of interesting stuff that I was trying to pull off, and always trying to merge universes that I like. I always
Okay.
enjoyed drawing. How can I draw on a computer?
Okay, awesome.
I always enjoyed making music. How can I make music on computer and whatnot? So yeah. So at that point, I was exploring a lot of graphic stuff because I was trying to learn programming and whatnot. And so it ended up doing posters for parties that my friends would host,
Okay.
and that in turn ended up being a little bit more serious, just doing freebies. Someone once took a chance and said, "Oh, well, I'm willing to pay for your work." Oh, that's interesting. My first paycheck ever was as a graphic designer, and I said, "Oh, this is nice." But I kept on doing whatever I was doing, and that snowballed a little bit. And I
Okay.
ended up having a very small studio here in Lisbon. I worked with Nike, some international companies, freelancing work, and that grew to a point to the 2008 crash.
Crash, yeah.
And so I thought perhaps it's time for me to get a job, because not only that things might shake up a little bit, I always felt that I did everything by myself, and perhaps I'm doing it all wrong. Let's see how a big structure does things and how I adapt to that structure. So I tapped the best, so to say, or at least the most known branding company here in Lisbon. And I went over there with my portfolio and said, I would love to work with you guys, and say, okay, let's try it out. And I ended up being there a couple of years. I got a lot of experience, and I got the headspace so to come up with the maximum pixel idea,
Okay.
the pixelated underwear. And so the craze at that point was crowdfunding. This was 2011-ish, something like that. So crowdfunding was the thing.
The thing,
Everyone is trying crowdfunding. I said, this is so exciting, because I have a little bit of a punk spirit, and I felt that with music as well. You don't have to depend on someone to just do your own thing.
Yeah.
What could I do to try this new stuff of a crowdfunding? And so I have that idea of the pixelated underwear. I said, no, perhaps this is nice, because I can find a couple of loonies that are willing to buy pixelated underwear. We should shoot a nice video and do something like that. And so that blew completely, because we took advantage of something that was bubbling, which was influencing and whatnot. Social media was that start, at least the graphical one of Instagram. And so we piggybacked on that. So it is by its essence a very graphical, very odd object to look at.
Yeah.
And so that blew up. And what started as a limited crowdfunded project that I thought that I was only going to post on my portfolio, like I did this, and this is interesting, turned into a company.
Oh, wow.
And from that on, we experimented with a lot of, we went away from the underwear, we did swimwear, we did a whole collection, we toured Europe, Asia, the US with it. So it was really interesting. And so and then by 2020-ish, so to say, I kind of was very burned out. And so the company, as all startups, was taking hits from every side. The first one being that when Facebook had that Cambridge Analytica scandal, our whole business was reliant on them, Facebook/Instagram. And so we had a major cut on that. And so we had to adapt really fast. And I did the wrong decision at that point, which was to double down on it instead of, again, taking a step back, having a nice breath and saying, okay, this was apparently an online business, direct to consumer. What could we do differently? So I doubled down on that, monetary and from my personal toll. And then the pandemic hit, and our business took again another toll. But it was a chance for me to get a little bit back, take that very needed breath, and going back into doing design consulting, experiencing, because I was so drained. I was thinking I will never have an interesting idea again in my life. I will never do anything business related, because I failed it completely. And so that was a lifesaver to me. And I didn't go back to my roots. It wasn't a poster again. It's not something simple, but sitting down with other businesses which were having troubles, and it was so refreshing to hear other people's
The
problems.
same thing, right?
And it was not a selfish process, but it was very fulfilling to say, oh, this guy is always, and it was so easy to understand being on the outside your problems and
Yeah.
solving them and getting excited. And so that rebalanced the way that I'm looking at the company again.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And it changed the strategy. And so the strategy now is take it slowly. We have a very interesting intellectual property that we're sitting on. We developed a very interesting product line. We have a space. We
Yeah.
have an audience. It's very interesting that the big brands are now jumping. And when I say big brands, Louis Vuitton and whatnot
Oh, wow.
are doing this pixelated stuff as well, trying to come up with products that merge what is real and it's not. So finally, the vision that I had on my PowerPoint presentations,
Exactly.
I was saying that
Yeah.
came to life. And so it validated the whole thing.
Yes.
But I'm not falling into the performance. I should grow and not.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I will grow whatever I can grow.
Yes.
If this goes bust, eventually it goes bust. If this grows very slowly, it will. But I have to stay focused on product and,
Yeah.
and creativity. And in the meantime,
And you, like, I think that's a big thing. You, like, sorry to interrupt. It's,
No worries.
you know, the big thing that I sort of getting a sense is that you were physically and emotionally being taxed in a way. And
definitely.
And so,
Definitely.
you know, the standard sort of mantra in startups is you must push through, you must have grit, you must
Yeah.
persevere.
Yeah, you
work-
have to come about on the
Yeah,
other side. There's a
it's-
guy that reads 50 books a year and he turned a profit and 5 exit strategies.
Yeah, and you lose the meaning of what that business gives to you, right?
Yeah.
And you get caught up in what it means to others, and then you become sort of a slave
That's-
to that expectation.
That's a key thing.
And I think stepping back, saying, well, COVID in its worst way was good for many people to sort of step back and say, I'm going to reevaluate meaning and life and what this actually means in my business. And so you were able to reframe
Yes.
it in a way that's more meaningful for yourself.
But to this day, I still feel bad even for the seed capital people that placed an offer on myself and on the business. I still feel bad for that.
Yeah.
And I still take that toll upon myself, not on the business. And
Yeah.
that's really difficult to separate things and say, okay, one thing was the business, one thing was me, and I did the best I can do.
Yeah,
And we're all grown-ups. We know the risks that were associated. But even then, I have nightmares about it. It's a really troubling process because you take yourself seriously. And if you're someone with character, obviously, and you love what you're doing, you feel bad. And you always say the fault was and the blame was on me. And I say that the blame was totally on me because I was the one steering the wheel. So again, there were a lot of, these were the circumstances, but they were not excuses. But to process that in a system where everyone says that everyone's going to be a winner, that everyone is going to pull back, it's very, very, very bad for you, I would say. It's a little bit like fitness. People like the body image that you project, everyone should be this, and people look at, oh, but I have to put in the efforts. Can I make it? Perhaps you don't have to be that fitness model, so to say. You have to start small, eventually you will fail, eventually you'll have a setback. I don't know. So society in that aspect, and that's the key thing that I didn't like about the startup. I think it's it's phony in a way and a little bit male dominated by that bravado, so to say. I did this, I did that, and that could
like the vanity of it, right? Like, you know, often I hear like I've raised X amount of money, look how amazing I am, and I'm like, oof, is it the right thing? Is it still a big deal? Like, and what I really appreciate actually is like a high level of accountability and authenticity in no matter, like, you realize that when you took money, right? And you carry that burden, you know, and I think that just the fact that you're authentic about it, people understand. Like, there's also like, yes, we know that everyone took a gamble and these things don't always work out. But the minute that you're authentic, like, I'm really sorry. Obviously. I take responsibility, and it creates an element of, okay, cool, we get it, and we're really sorry about that. But you know, like you see this other stuff where people take, you know, billions of dollars and on vaporware, and they don't. It's like I think that I don't think that, you know, it's good to be built that way, and that will circle back in a negative way at some point.
Yeah, but the culture is that one of the first people that I sat down with was a very interesting to me as an experience, and we didn't end up doing business together or didn't end up investing. But the first question he asked is, how many businesses did you tank already? And I said, none. I was really happy about myself. No, none. And this is going very well. And he said, that's a bummer, because I always tend to invest on people that already went through hell.
Yeah.
Because if they're trying and willing to do it a second time or a third time,
Yeah.
and not with that fancy romantic story, oh, I did this and I pivoted to that. No, they really tanked the business and they started it all over again. So that means something. And I believe that as well.
Yeah.
And even when I'm sitting down as a design consultant, and again, and there I have a little bit more of headroom, I try to go into that feeling with the person that is in front of me. Obviously not asking, is this business going bust? But what are the real dangers? What keeps you up at night? What worries you? Because that informs all the rest.
Yeah.
And even and you see a lot of that in design, because design, or marketing is the last key aspect of a business. If you want to showcase a lot, perhaps you're feeling frightened, or either by a competitor, or you feeling that you're pivoting into something that you don't understand. So I really tried to tap into that with empathy. What is the key thing here? What can go bad?
Exactly. And I think you also want to see a development in terms of learning from someone who's failed. The constant same failure is a problem.
Oh yeah,
obviously. Right. And then someone's like, I felt like I failed, but I really understand that my bottleneck was here, or my limitation was here, is really good, because they're like, okay, so you know how to navigate that now, right? It's might have been an expensive learning, but the learning was there. But someone who's constantly failing at the same point but doesn't realize where it is, and you might, consulting with someone, be able to pick that apart. You seem to have the same failure point all the time, so why is this time going to be successful, which is an important thing to say.
And we know businesses, and we know that figure, so to say, 90% of them go bust. It's pretty odd that the whole thing just celebrates the 1% of the 10% that succeeded, like the super extreme healthy. And I would say that everyone should benefit if the other stories came around. And not by a defeat point of view, like shaming or saying, no, you shouldn't do this. No, listen what these people done wrong, because there's nothing wrong with them. How could we learn from this? And it would be a very more honest conversation, so to say. So again, you were saying that I'm humble at times. It's not, this is not falsely being humble. It's like being very much in tune of what my experience was, and really opening myself to learning from other people and exposing. I could be posing here as, but I did this correctly, I did that, and you should hire me.
I never got the feeling that it was posed, right? I get a real sense of appreciation for the journey and for the failures and those you've impacted, you know.
And again, it can result on a no.
When
if you're my client, I could say no to you. I don't think this is the right way to go. Why? Well, because I don't. Because you eventually will fail here. Why? Because I have the experience, and from what you told me, and sometimes some mistakes can be corrected if we have that conversation. And so I feel that's very intensive, and I feel like a lot of people burn out or something like that because they have this very competitive and this imaginary, for some people that drive works, and I'm not judging. For some people that's the juice. I want to step on it, and I want to do that even if it looks impossible, and I want to defeat everyone that comes my way. Okay, no judging there. But I get the sense that, at least by the statistics of it, that most people have some bad nights at bed. They question themselves. It takes a toll on their physical and mental health, as you said with your case story, which is very interesting. You have the gym and you're feeling, but I'm not getting the reward that
what I'm building here. I think
so. Why?
And I think that the one, I mean, there is also there's those who are incredibly analytical, very process driven, super startup. Like, they like to be in that space. That's a good space for them to be in. That's where they define themselves, and so they'll continue. And so, but I also find that they don't deviate from their vision, right? So like great founders that I've worked with that are really difficult to work with, don't allow a degree of deviation. They become very difficult to work with because
sociopathic.
They're like this is the vision, this is how we will execute, this has to happen, and you can respect that on another level of saying, like, they're going to get to where they want to go, right?
Okay.
And they might burn through a lot of people, and they don't have the emotional capacity to worry about that. But it's another way that they become incredibly successful or incredibly big. You get different types of business owners in sort of every sense of the word, and I'm more on your side. Is that like if I borrowed money to sort of roll finances from a friend who had a proper investment firm, and just like the thought that I was going to be late on the payment, just like, and because it was a friend, it was literally killing me. I was like, the stress related to that.
That's an issue. That's an advice I would
Yeah.
try to
Yeah.
keep your
friends and your business
Yes.
are completely separate, because it doesn't, in a lot of times it doesn't go to plan. You have to maneuver things slightly different, or you have to roll on that debt a little bit longer, and you have to go back with a bit of a sob story. And when it's a friend, it's a really tough thing to do.
Yes. And I've found that some of the people that I associated with were not friends and became friends through the business, and that's very interesting.
Yeah.
So if I had a dream partner at this point, or to project it in the future, it was someone that I could share some energy with,
Yes.
eventually a vision, and that we could start a business / a friendship, business related with.
Yeah.
That would be the perfect scenario at this point, involving with that kind of person, with the knowledge that that friendship could go sour because of the business. But then again, it would be grounded on it. So let's say if it were to be a true friendship, it would outlast the business.
Absolutely.
If it were not, okay, because that we were together just doing business and trying to at least pull this vision.
And you'll have a much higher level of empathy with each other, because you're walking the same path, right? Like, so a good friendship that you build through partnership or business will have like similar views on things. You'll have similar sort of journey that you've walked, and similar pains. So your friendship should last that. I think you will definitely have some great fights along the way, but those will breed higher thinking in terms of what you're trying to execute. Yeah.
But what do you think that this landscape of startups, this whole, and I think that's influenced by the whole Silicon Valley story of the one or through two business cases that are what we call extreme successes, whatever that means, via its growth or its implementation. Do you think that this is changing, or this is or this is one tone of it, but there's a lot of underlying? Because for me, I don't know if this is a Portugal / European thing. It kind of feel that it reverberates into everything. Every startup conversation that I have, either it's tech, or this is the goal to get, or this is the way that the jargons are used, or the growth, or the. Do you think that is, from your experience, that you are way more exposed than I am? Is this changing? Are we at a different point in time?
So I'm not understanding the question very well in terms of, so what do you mean in terms of what specifically is changing?
If this whole Silicon Valley performance thing, that the success is measured by a startup that merges into something monumental, and then that goes into an IPO, if that's the only way that people who invest and think about startups is the only roadmap, or if there's alternatives, slow going businesses that are more into tune with, I don't know, the environment, other people, feelings, I don't know. Is this the dominant? Is this the discourse, so to say? On
I guess I get your question. I think it depends where the money's coming from.
Okay.
Not only in terms of country, in terms of sort of the portfolio of the objectives of that business, right? Like, so I think that the bigger the fund gets, the less flexibility it has in terms of spotting innovation and the innovators, right? Like they then get like sort of cookie cut into investment and what the output should be. So I think that smaller operators, sort of the one-on-one investors, they tend to be a lot more flexible and understanding and visionary. But right now, everyone's looking for the big scale, the big globalizer, like the big opportunity, and there's high risk with VC money. So I think that it changes the flexibility that they have. So yeah, like I said, it depends where the money is coming from, and and that's often why they say get sort of friends, family, and fools to invest first, because they will be more accommodating of the visionary in you and the things that you're trying to build and trying to create than those who have to then report back to investors and shareholders. And so it depends very much where the money's coming from.
Because from my end of it, who's analyzing the creative needs of new businesses that should be innovative, to use a word that is thrown across the street every now and then, disruptive, whatever you want to call it. I think that people are kind of holding themselves back because they're already trying to think about that path. I should do this right now because eventually I will have a board and I have to show them if. And I'm thinking, but this is the time where you should expand and go crazy. And again, going crazy with rules and sets. But try it out. So I, in a way, from my perspective, and even big clients, we always have this. Perhaps I'll have a sit down. I've tried to mention something that I find bizarre, that is saying no. But most of the times what happens, for instance, you saw the streaming on this, or the sock motion video. Oh, this is so cool. I want to hire this guy to do something for me because I saw these two objects. And you sit me down and say, I love this. I want this for me. I say, okay, so let's rehearse this kind of output to you. And you start to go afraid immediately. Oh no, because this.
You must just tell me.
Because this is. Oh no, because this is very risky, and this is putting us off. This is touching a new client base that I haven't thought of yet. So people instantly go and retract themselves. And most of the times because of that narrative, because perhaps I'm throwing money at this and this will not produce an immediate outcome, conversions, whatever And so that's exploratory territory that creativity has in its own native way, either via design or marketing or just business. I think it's being a little bit strangled. And I think that, I don't know, perhaps a young kid now at a college with a stupid idea is not willing to do it because he thinks, oh, perhaps I should do this in tech or something like Facebook or something like that. And he tries to pivot it to those business that he finds successful. And the stories of those companies were, this is crazy. And so you need a market.
It's getting sold the wrong story too, right? Like the kids looking at if you look at the most successful, they only post the success track record of that person, like you're saying, not only in business but in life. Went to this university, did this, but there's like, okay, so that's the path I have to follow to be this, but actually the model is doing. I just did this and then that broke and then I tried this and then I pivoted on this. And so, again, about getting money for creativity, for creative projects, anything, there's a risk component in what the appetite of risk in the partner you have is. Like, so I'm saying, like, what's your appetite for risk? Because then I can be as creative as you want me to be. If you have low appetite for risk, then we'll just do a normal Facebook marketing campaign and we'll measure it this way and we'll put 1,000 euros in and we'll get this out. Right? Like, so it really is depending on, like, what the appetite for risk is, and that will define a lot of who you do business with.
But do you think that the whole ecosystem is brewing these kinds of ideas, or by always punching everything to those extreme success stories, it's narrowing it down? Because I tend to go to the latter. I think I believe, and being on the startup ecosystem, I kind of felt that every conversation, and even the craziest ones with the craziest ideas, were always trying to tone them down, to adapt, to go through that path.
Exactly.
Yes. And so I feel like we're not exciting and we're not enticing new and fresh ideas, business and design and whatever. And we have that chat in which we're always discussing the role of AI. And I think that AI is playing a role of lowering down creativity, because it's a very important tool, obviously. But if you think that it will produce the output and you don't have to go your crazy way, then everyone is lowering their standards and all the ideas are leveling up by each other. And so the market is going to be a little bit blender. And so I think that's and congrats for promoting these kinds of conversations in which people can
Yeah, I think it's important to do, right? Like,
these kinds of talks without just how many units have you sold last year? What
yeah.
is that pitch? No, 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 no.
But I think, yeah, I think that those essentially like vanity metrics, aren't going to promote higher thinking around concepts, right? Which we should try
Okay.
and really sort of incubate for people. It's like, is that I want people to go out and try things and fail things, and not just because it's a startup-y thing to say. It's just because the learning that's attached to that, and decisions that you make should prioritize the learning.
Okay.
And so if you can do that, and you can expose yourself to mentors who will prioritize your learning rather than your
Okay.
outputs, you're like, those things are going to generate a lot more. And so the AI is another concept. Like, I have a view that it's a really good opportunity for creatives to be more creative, because AI can run your business for you now, right? Like, it can do the mundane for you better. And so it creates that platform for you to go and be more creative. So say like, okay, this is the product that I want to develop. These are the concepts I want to develop, but I don't want to get caught in the admin of my business in terms of the structure, in terms of the what next and the planning. And so AI will now spit that playbook out for you fairly well and help you structure that, and you can go and be more creative. It's just about how you're going to use it at the end of the day.
Yes.
And so yeah, I agree. It's like, the risk is that we lean too much on it and we just dumb ourselves down. Or you'll have the innovators in that space who say, I'm going to develop something way more because I don't have to spend any time on this other component of my life.
Yeah, and that was the promise all along about technology. Computers were here to help you solve problems, and in a way they have solved a lot. But at the same time, you became kind of hostage of it, because you leveled down and everyone was trying to get the same thing. And this is going a little bit more transcendental now, but it's cool. This is more creative space. But I think that there's a lot of interesting stuff, but the dominant key has become a little bit duller from a creative standpoint now.
I agree with you. Yeah.
And we really should take advantage, the rebels of the life, of these new tools popping up, not to do the same boring thing like, oh, I'll use AI to draw another t-shirt brand that can monetize on Facebook and run the same business model, but do something crazy and burst into it. And
I think that's where the outliers live.
I think
that's
so.
where the 1%ers live, right?
And like, I'm a super optimist, and I'm always expecting that.
But this is the warning to there, is like, just leverage AI to be the outlier, not to be the everybody.
Yeah. Hopefully, yes. Hopefully, I'm just eager to see what a kid comes up with, messing up with AI as we did back in the day, trying to hook up computers to something. And so let them do that, and hopefully they'll have the open mind and not just thinking about conversions and doing business plans and whatnot, and just openly going about it.
That's it from me today. I really enjoyed our conversation. And if you have anything else you want to just like, super good. And thanks for making the time to come and chat to me today.
Likewise. Thank you for inviting me.
Cheers, Eddie. Bye.